So welcome to neurophysiology. In the first 4 sessions, we're going to go over some pretty basic anatomical things. So if you're familiar with basic structures in the nervous system, you might be more comfortable switching to session number 5, where we'll kick off talking about brain extracellular fluids and then move through nervous system concepts from there. If you haven't looked at nervous system before, then I would recommend going through sessions 1 to 4 just to get familiar with some of the major structures and terminology. As you know, our nervous system can mediate a tremendous range of functions, from the unconscious control of our viscera to sensory perceptions, voluntary movements, behaviors, emotions, dreams, and abstract thought. Our nervous tissue is basically composed of neurons and numerous support cells called glia. We have around 10 to the power 11 neurons, which creates almost limitless potential for neuronal circuits and patterns of connectivity. An important concept in medical neurophysiology is regional specialization. So we'll be talking about particular parts of the nervous system that mediate vision or hearing or movement and so on. And as a result of this, damage to specific parts of the nervous system can cause very predictable sets of symptoms that will aid in the clinical diagnosis of a lesion. In neurophysiology, we're mostly interested in nervous system at the cellular and system level, but it is necessary to have some basic neuroanatomy and terminology. So the goals then of the first session are to introduce some terminology and major anatomical structures in the system. The major structures then are the brain, consisting of the cerebrum and cerebellum, connected through a brain stem, labeled here in blue, down to the spinal cord, and connected to 12 pairs of cranial nerves and 31 pairs of spinal nerves that communicate out to the periphery. This slide shows several frequently used anatomical references that you'll need to be familiar with. Just to be confusing, terminology changes depending on whether you're above or below this small area here called the midbrain. Below this level, we use the terms rostral and caudal to mean towards the head or towards the tail, respectively. However, once we're above the midbrain, because of the way the brain expands and curves in embryologic development, rostral now means towards the front, and caudal now means towards the back of the brain. The words dorsal and ventral are used when below the midbrain to mean towards the back or front of the body, respectively. But notice above the midbrain, dorsal is used to mean towards the top. Superior and ventral is meaning now towards inferior, towards the bottom. Mercifully, anterior and posterior always mean towards the front or back of the body or brain, respectively, and superior and inferior will always mean towards the top of the cerebral cortex or down towards the sacral end of the spinal cord. Some other important terminology derives from anatomical planes. The median sagittal plane divides the nervous system into 2 equal halves in the anterior-posterior plane. So now we have a left and right side that are mirror images of each other. With reference to this plane then, the word medial means towards that median plane, whereas lateral means away from that median plane. The word ipsilateral is used when we're talking about things that are on 2 points that are on the same side, whereas the word contralateral will refer to 2 objects on opposite sides. The coronal slice shown here is another vertical plane just at 90 degrees to the sagittal plane. And we'll also sometimes talk about a horizontal plane that just runs at 90 degrees to these vertical planes through the body. Later on, we'll have a whole section on cellular neuroscience and get into the details of what neurons look like and what their component parts are. But for now, recognize that our generic neuron will have a cell body or a soma that contains the nucleus and the rough endoplasmic reticulum. And then there'll be processes or neurites extending out from the body. We have an axon, that's the cellular process carrying action potentials away from the soma. Axons can be very long and can have multiple branches. And other neurites are referred to as dendrites. They have a similar structure to axons, but these structures receive impulses from other neurons. And these can be extremely extensive, in which case they're often referred to as dendritic trees. The table below here just shows some other words that you'll come across along the way. When we gather collections of neuronal cell bodies together, large areas are often referred to as gray matter or cortex or nucleus within the central nervous system. Smaller structures, you'll see words like locus, substantia, or ganglion. Similarly, when you look at collections of axons, they might be termed white matter or tracts or capsule, commissures, and smaller structures here, lemniscus or nerve. So a lot of words that all essentially mean similar things here. From an anatomic point of view, the nervous system can be divided into central and peripheral nervous systems, CNS and PNS. And all that distinguishes whether a structure is in one or the other is whether it's inside or outside the membranous layers called the meninges. The meninges is a collective term for three membranous layers that enclose the CNS. The dura mater is the outermost layer here, closely attached to the skull, and that's a very tough connective tissue layer. The middle layer of the three is the arachnoid mater, shown here in purple, and that lies just beneath the dura, and it follows the dura pretty closely. Importantly then, beneath that there is a space, the subarachnoid space, and that's filled with cerebrospinal fluid. The innermost layer is referred to as the pia mater, and this one is a very delicate membrane that's closely following the surface of the brain and spinal cord. Some other important anatomical words are afferent and efferent. Afferent refers to nerves entering the central nervous system, what from a functional standpoint we would think of as sensory, whereas efferent refers to something leaving the central nervous system moving out into the periphery, which we might functionally consider as some kind of motor neuron function, such as those involved in muscle control. Some other important words used to describe divisions of the nervous system are more based on functional organization. So we can refer to the somatic nervous system, which is really thinking about the limbs and body wall, and communication between the central nervous system and the skin, muscles, and joints, and so on. Or we can talk about the autonomic nervous system, which is associated with the innervation of the viscera. And we'll be talking at length later on about subdivisions of the autonomic nervous system, such as the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric. In the next session, we're going to focus in a bit more on the major central nervous system structures and look a little bit at the embryologic origins of these structures.